He was talking about wanting to buy a Corvette and sign the title over to me if I came up with the money, various things like that. I think more than anything, he was very, very controlling, demanding. I would say demanding. So demanding of my time. It was very, very difficult for me to get the time that I needed with my children, which I have a lot of regret over, obviously, now. So he controlled my time. I didn't have breathing space. I didn't have room with my children. He demanded a lot from me, didn't really give a lot, demanded a lot financially, and at one point even expressed that to me verbally. If you're in a relationship with me, this is what I expect. So very quickly it became, we had a big Christmas event at the singles group. Very quickly it became expected that I was to pay for the rental of this tux, even though we went to this event not even looking like we were dating or together. So it was demanded and expected, and yeah, he was very explosive with customer service people in public settings. He, at one point, verbally screaming and yelling at me. So I think I got to a place where I was living in a lot of fear with him.
I'm Donna Anderson, and this is True Love Fraud Stories. Among the first tales we told for the True Love Fraud Stories podcast were two about a con man named Carlo Giovanni Malozzi. He had swindled two women at the same time in the fall of 2021. They joined forces to file a court case against him, which they won. We also told the story of a woman from Florida who dealt with Malozzi much earlier, in 2014. He conned her out of $500, even though she never met him in person. This woman never recovered her money. After the stories were published, we heard from multiple other women who had also had run-ins with Carlo Giovanni Malozzi. One of them was Judith of Arizona, who apparently encountered Malozzi after he left Florida. To protect her privacy, I am only using her first name. Judith heard about our podcast from her daughter.
At some level, I was surprised because for some reason I thought I was the only one who had experienced what I did with him. And then once I had listened to the podcasts and interviews with the two other ladies, I'm like, yep, this is his character. This is who he is.
Judith was born and raised in New Zealand. When she was 19, she joined Mercy Ships, which brings state-of-the-art medical care to third world countries. Eventually, Judith ended up working in the charitable organization's administrative offices in the United States. That's where she met her ex-husband. Judith was married for 20 years and had 3 children whom she calls amazing. Her husband, however, was unfaithful. They tried to reconcile, but the marriage was not recoverable. Her husband pursued a divorce. Judith admits that she shouldn't have been surprised by the divorce, but she was. It was a challenging time in her life.
I was pretty vulnerable for quite a few years. I had stayed at home with my children while we were married. And at the time of our divorce, I was making $12.25 an hour. My family, of course, were all on the other side of the world. So I really did not have a lot, well, very little practical support. I had fairly good emotional support with friends, church, and my family. But trying to recover from a 20-year marriage, trying to find a career for myself and get on my feet, really build from scratch financially, all the while parenting three fairly young children. And during the process of that, there was probably a year and a half where I had full custody of the children. So by the time I met Carlo, although I was managing okay, I was vulnerable, and I think I was looking for some relief somehow, some way, somewhere.
Judith first encountered Carlo Giovanni Malozzi when she decided to attend a Christian singles group that met at her church.
I wasn't necessarily planning on going to the singles group regularly, although I was impressed with the group. It was a very, very large Christian singles group. I would say probably 100 people met at the group every Monday night. And so it wasn't till about a month later, after the first time I went, that I thought, oh, I'll just go back. And immediately, Carlo was right there, asking me to come sit with him as he was a table host. There were circular tables throughout the auditorium. So I sat at his table. As soon as the meeting was done, he asked for my number, called me on the way home, and then I would say very, very aggressively and somewhat almost suspiciously pursued me. It was not your typical pursuit, that's for sure.
Judith was 48 years old at the time, and Carlo was 7 years younger than her. He seemed like a nice guy.
He initially was very respectful, very, I would say, gentlemanly, and just very almost platonic, almost. We ended up spending quite a bit of time together. And it was always enjoyable. I wouldn't say necessarily super romantic, but just enjoyable to spend time with him.
And what did she find appealing about him?
He's a very, very charming, very charismatic personality. I remember being out in a group with him with some of the people from the singles group. And this, to me, kind of epitomizes who Carlo is. So we were all sitting outside at a Starbucks after an event. It was, an warm Arizona evening, but not hot, so it was comfortable outside. It's probably a group of maybe 20 people in a very large circle, just chatting, enjoying being together. One or two people left as it kind of approached 11 o'clock. And yet the majority of the group remained until Carlo stood up. And then the whole entire group dissipated. And to me, that just really showed the kind of influence, charisma that he had over people. And in a way, I think people were very, very drawn to him. He was very, very well presented. always immaculately dressed, oftentimes in a suit jacket. And the majority of the chatter among the women was how impressed they were with him, how good looking he was, and just a lot of admiration for him. So he was very, very smooth. That would really, really state how he comes across as very smooth.
Carlo was working at a car dealership when Judith met him, although that didn't last very long. In fact, he never held a steady job during the entire time she was involved with him. Judith didn't know much about Carlo's early life, but she did learn that he had been adopted by an Italian-American family who lived in the Boston area.
He initially gave me the impression that he was from Italy and that he had been born in Italy. However, later came out that, in fact, he was born in Colombia. His parents and a possible brother, there's some discrepancies in that story. But for sure, his parents were killed in Colombia, and he was put into an orphanage in Colombia and adopted by an Italian family. They came down to Colombia to get him as a late teenager. The parents divorced, and he ended up living on the streets as a result of that divorce. And so during the time that he was living on the streets, he was going from one shelter to another, from foster family to another foster family.
Eventually, Carlo ended up in Maine, living with a woman named Terry and her family. Carlo said this foster family introduced him to God and religion and helped him turn his life around.
If you're wondering if someone in your life is a narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath, and you need advice on escape and recovery, talk to Donna. Donna Anderson, author of LoveFraud.com and host of True Love Fraud Stories, offers personal consultations. Since she founded Love Fraud in 2005, Donna has collected more than 10,000 cases. So she's probably heard a story like yours before. You're certainly not alone. Donna is also a certified Reiki master. Reiki is a healing approach for stress reduction and relaxation. Donna combines this with her deep emotional release technique to help you let go of the pain of your experience. Book your session today at lovefraud.com/talk to Donna.
Carlo's foster family eventually moved to Arizona. When Carlo left Florida at around age 40, he looked them up and spent time with them. Relatively early in her involvement with Carlo, he invited Judith to meet his foster family. She found them to be wonderful people and is still in contact with them.
They're all amazing, amazing people. Terry feels like family to me. She is a wonderful, wonderful lady.
Carlo mentioned that he had been abused in his adoptive family, but didn't say much about what had happened.
I did not know the extent of the abuse. And there were things that were communicated to me from his foster family. So that whole thing there is a bit of a blur.
Carlo pursued Judith aggressively. For her part, she didn't try to slow the relationship down.
I think that because I was in a vulnerable state after a difficult marriage after a very, very difficult divorce, after trying to co-parent with my ex-husband, now with a stepmother in the middle of things, and trying to get myself on track as far as finances and a career. I think I probably was in a more vulnerable place than what I actually even realized. And I think that over the years of perhaps even childhood, definitely in marriage, I was not in a place where I had strong boundaries, and I was not in a place where I was comfortable speaking up for myself. I don't think I had ever really learned to speak up for myself. And I think really calling out issues, I had not learned how to do that either. So I would say overall, walking into the relationship with Carlo, I was vulnerable and I was easily manipulated and controlled.
And what did Carlo want?
Money. Money. He wanted money. And for whatever reason, that boundary, I felt very, very fearful of him. I think I was desperate to be loved, to be accepted, to be valued. And so in some ways, I think I became pretty frantic trying to earn acceptance, and it was through finances.
One of the early examples of Judith spending her hard-earned money on Carlo was when he convinced her to pay for his tuxedo rental for the singles Christmas party.
We're going to the singles Christmas event, and it's very formal, and I want to look my absolute best, and I want to make sure that, that we look good together or whatever, just all about him and how he was going to look. And, I don't have the money and I need you to take care of this and blah, 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 blah. And so just, laying it on thick. And then we went separately. We didn't sit together. We barely interacted all night. He asked me to come to an event after, and I was like, no, by that time, it was fairly early in the relationship. And so I was like, no, I just want to go home. Saw him leaving arm in arm with another woman. I mean, there were so many red flags right from the start. And I chose to overlook them and was charmed by them.
Judith paid for his tux, and he ignored her at the party. In fact, he left with another woman. Carlo took advantage of her. How did she feel about it?
Yeah, right. Obviously, high alert, red flags are up. Disappointed, he made a point of somebody having a photo taken with me and him, but that was the extent of it. And, part of it was, I think we started really, I guess you would call it dating in October. And it was November, maybe early December. So I tried to just brush it off, but yeah, it was disappointing and hurtful for sure. But I didn't get out. As I said, my boundaries were not strong, and I was vulnerable. So I kept on pushing forward. And I think in some ways, I was still dealing with some level of regret for the way that I had handled things in my own marriage. And in the back of my head, I think there was some level of, I need to, not that I need to make it right, but I need to do it differently. And so I was letting things slide that I shouldn't have.
Later, almost a year into their relationship, Carlo talked about them living together.
He was hopping from roommate situation to roommate situation. They never worked out for him. There was always something wrong with them. And he just started kind of pushing to want to live together. And when I resisted it at one point, he put on the oh, I get it, you just don't love me and you don't want to be with me, and the guilt trip kind of thing.
She didn't realize it at the time, but now Judith recognizes that laying on a guilt trip was one of the ways in which Carlo manipulated and abused her. Why did he do it?
I would say that because of Carlo's upbringing, his childhood, his own personal trauma, living on the streets for as many years as he did, Carlo's adapted behavior has become to be charming, to be manipulative, to survive. And so part of his survival and coping mechanisms were, I would say, almost pathological lies. And I saw those lies on numerous occasions. I knew I was being lied to. I remember one time we were in I think it was a container store, just wandering around, looking at the various organizational things for the home. And, mid looking through this store, he's like, I got to go to the bathroom. Well, rather than go to the bathroom in that particular store, be in and out in 5 minutes, he walked way across the parking lot to a restaurant and didn't come back for 45 minutes. So he was always being, I'm trying to find the word, not mysterious, not deceptive, but evasive. And I was so afraid to say, what the hell were you doing for 45 minutes? Because I knew that if I did, I'd get blown up at. So anytime I saw those evasive, suspicious behaviors, I could not question them. So I think, lies, manipulation, and a very, very suspicious, evasive behavior. I think at one point when we were living together, I had some thyroid medicine that I needed to pick up, some anxiety medicine because anxiety was high in the relationship with him. And he blew up at me because money was needing to be spent on thyroid medication and anxiety medicine.
It was her money, and she needed the medicine. So why did she put up with his selfish and abusive behavior?
I think there was so much fear that I was dealing with. I think I became I would say I became trapped in the relationship because I had completely lost my voice. And I think the longer I was in the relationship, the more power I lost. So I would say that I was just losing any sense of myself, any sense of my own personal power, and really, really, truly became powerless with him.
Carlo was so demanding that Judith couldn't spend time with her children, and she couldn't focus on her new career in real estate. Everything was all about Carlo. He was the one making future plans for them.
During our relationship, he had always talked about the two of us potentially moving either to Texas, Kansas, or to Florida. And so while we were living together, that was coming up a lot. And so I feel like I really pushed him to go back to San Antonio because I felt like, this relationship is bad, and that at least is something I can kind of direct and encourage. So I did encourage him to go to San Antonio. And so thankfully he did. And that provided me with the space and distance that I needed to really have that distance. And it actually was what caused the relationship to end.
Carlo did move to San Antonio, but he was still in touch with Judith.
So he moved to San Antonio, wanted me to come out and visit him there, which I did. Spent, I think it was 10 days there. Loved San Antonio. Or maybe it was only a week, 10 days, whatever. I came back to Arizona. One particular day, he was being very evasive, suspicious, just not communicating with me at the level that he typically would throughout the day. And things I could tell just something was off. And so he ended that evening. He blew up at me and ended the relationship. I just can't take this anymore. You're just so mistrustful, whatever. And ended the relationship. We continued to talk. And he kept on telling me, well, I just think this is just a time and a season. And, giving me the idea that we would potentially get back together. So really, I think stringing me along.
Still, Carlo blocked Judith on social media.
But for some random reason, about 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe after he had broken off the relationship, I did a search for him on social media. And up popped all these tags and various things with him with a lady in San Antonio. One of the posts was, hey, we just got home from dinner, and it was a picture of him outside of his apartment that I had visited him at, and the word home was used. We just got home from dinner, and she had tagged him on it, and then changed her relationship status to be in a relationship with him. And it literally was probably her relationship status was changed probably less than 2 hours after he broke up with me. So I reached out to her via social media and said, hey, just wanted to let you know I've been living with this man. And she said, oh, we need to talk. So we compared notes and talked, and I confronted him, and he ended that relationship. I'm not quite sure why, but he did. And she, in the 3 weeks that they had been together, was already beginning to experience, hey, we're going to get married and let's move to Dallas, or let's move here, or let's move there. And hey, I want to sign over the title on my vehicle to you so that you can give me X amount of dollars so I can buy a Rolex watch. So in those first 3 weeks of the relationship, he was already starting the same things. And also, she had been charmed by him. She was very, very upset that the relationship had ended. So he had worked his charms on her and began the process of manipulating her financially.
Judith doesn't remember feeling devastated that the relationship was over. If anything, she was relieved. Still, Carlo wasn't totally gone.
There would be phone calls here and there, things like that. So, we were kind of just going along with our lives separately, but he was definitely in contact. During that time, I had communicated with the singles pastor of the church that we had met at, and he told me that during the course of our relationship that many women had come to him complaining about Carlo, the things that he was doing. With one woman, first thing out of his mouth almost was, "Hey, do you have a 401k?" And then as the conversation progressed, "Let's cash out your 401k, get a motorhome, and go and do ministry around the country." So just a lot of complaints, obviously. And it also, with talking to the woman in San Antonio, it became apparent that he had already established a relationship with her while he was living with me in Arizona. So during that time, after we broke up, there was still some communication. I guess I was still hanging on at some level. And when he decided he was moving back to Arizona and needed help, I jumped.
What does Judith mean by that?
I went out to San Antonio and I helped him move. So he had me wrapped around his little finger, that is for sure.
Judith drove 16 hours to San Antonio. Carlo loaded his possessions into her car and his car, and they headed back. They almost made it, but an hour and a half from home, Carlo's car broke down and had to be towed.
So we drove back together from Tucson to Phoenix, and he was what I thought at the time fairly genuinely expressing some regrets over the way that our relationship had gone, and owning up, taking responsibility, admitting to abuse. I don't know whether it was a play, but at the time it seemed fairly sincere and genuine.
Carlo wanted to maintain contact with Judith, and she cautiously allowed it.
We did spend some time together. It was very, like maybe once a week. He had a very, very nice, I would say luxury apartment. No clue how he was affording it. I was not paying a dime. So once a week, I'd spend some time with him. He had washer and dryer in his apartment. I didn't. So I'd just bring my laundry over. He'd cook dinner. We'd watch our favorite shows, and I'd get my laundry done and go home. And it was just I could see at times where he would start to express frustration with me, and he would stop himself, and he would, go a different direction, like try to regroup and say what he wanted to say in a kinder way. So I was starting to think that maybe I could let my guard down a little bit.
But then she saw Carlo's true colors again.
Then we were sitting on the couch one night. He had been claiming for however long the period of time it had been, maybe a couple of months, I'm not dating, I'm not interested in dating. We just had this nice, what I thought was kind of a nice friendship, really. And I kept my distance, and he seemed to be making some changes. So we were sitting on the couch one night, and a text came in. "Hey, sweetheart, I hope you made it home last night okay." And I froze, and because he'd been telling me I'm not dating, I'm not seeing anybody, the whole thing. So I just kind of froze, was scared, extremely, extremely scared to say anything, and just didn't know what to do. And so I made a beeline out of his apartment. On the way out, we had already made plans to spend time together on Saturday. It was a Thursday night that I was there. And because I had started to let my guard down a little bit, like maybe we can see each other more than once a week or whatever it might be. So as I was heading out the door, he said something to the effect of, "Oh, are we still going to get together on Saturday?" And I said, "No." I said, "You just got a text from somebody asking if you made it home okay last night. Hey, sweetheart, did you make it home okay?" Well, he blew up at me. "I don't owe you an explanation for anything. We're not dating. I don't have to tell you anything." And so I said, "No, you don't." I said, "I don't care who you're dating. I just need you to be honest with me." So he walked me out to the car, helped me with my laundry. I got home. He laid into me for an hour on the phone. I have no memory of what that was or why I tolerated it for an hour, but he did. And then I think it was the next day, he said, "Well, yes, I am actually dating somebody, and we're going to church together and spending time together and blah, blah, blah." And he said, "But you're still my best friend, and, I still want to see you." And so I said, "Okay, well, let me get back to you." So next day I got back to him and I said, "Look," I said, "you may be able to do this with a clear conscience. You may be able to keep your ex-girlfriend who you lived with in your life, have me over." And I didn't say it to this extent. I just said, "You may be able to do this with a clear conscience." But I said, "I can't." And he said, "Okay, well, have a nice life." And that was it.
At this point, Judith finally told Carlo's foster family the truth about his behavior.
Right after that happened was when he moved to Vegas. And so I shared for the first time in more detail with Terry and her family what had happened over the course of our relationship. And they felt that he had used them to paint a picture of who he was. So he had really used them as a manipulation tool. And so they were upset. He got wind of it and was very upset about it as well. I don't remember how I found out that he was upset about it. But he felt that I had destroyed his relationship with his family. No responsibility on his part for his actions.
Judith's involvement with Carlo Giovanni Malozzi was over, but she still wasn't out of the woods.
I made some very, very bad choices for probably a couple of years. He had completely drained me financially. I was in massive debt. I'd lost a home I owned. And I spiraled further downward for a few years. The abuse that I had experienced with him was severe. And rather than take the time to heal, I continued to make destructive choices. And finally, I got to the point of realizing, hey, if I want my life to look differently, I've got to make different choices. And so I made some very, very purposeful decisions to change what I was doing in my life. And over time, those purposeful decisions paid off, and I was able to heal, and still in the healing process for many things in my life, but still working through healing, grow, establish a career that at one point was flourishing when the market was great, struggling a bit now with an adjusted real estate market, but really was able to get my life back on track.
So how did this experience affect Judith?
Wow. I mean, it had in many ways a profound effect on me. I think my trust of men was already weak from my marriage, and possibly even before that. And so what I allowed myself to go through with Carlo deepened that sense of mistrust. I would say there are triggering events from time to time. So, I mean, really, I think there was trauma as a result of that relationship, and things that I'm, still healing from, still learning to feel comfortable and secure in using my voice in life in general.
Judith reflected on what her recovery has been like.
It's a process. I think any time there's been significant painful events in anybody's life, whether it's relationship, whether it's health, whether it's death, whatever it might be, it's a painful and difficult process. I would say that I'm in a very, very good spot emotionally, continuing to grow and heal and work towards being more confident and trusting my instincts. I think with both my marriage and with Carlo, any instincts that I had were squashed. And so it's a process to learn to trust myself. It's a process to learn to feel safe, expressing my opinions, my point of view, feel safe standing up for myself. So I think recovery is a process, and I'm a long way into it, and very, very thankful to be on the other side of both a very abusive relationship, extremely abusive relationship with Carlo, and an abusive marriage.
Because of her healing, Judith was able to find a new, healthy relationship. She's been with her new man for almost 4 years. It's very different from her previous experiences.
I would say there's still an element of me struggling to speak up for myself. However, there is not abuse. It's a very stable relationship, very genuine, sincere, enjoyable. I would say my tendencies to be a little bit more timid than I should or need to be. So I tiptoe around a little bit, not necessarily because of anything he's doing, but just learning to be safe and express and use my voice.
How does it feel to be in a real relationship after what she endured with Carlo Giovanni Malozzi?
It's comfortable. It's stable. It's there's no trauma. It's nice. It's very, very, very nice. Yeah.
I'm Donna Anderson, and this is True Love Fraud Stories. Carlo Giovanni Malozzi met and quickly targeted Judith, as he had targeted the other women whom we interviewed previously. Essentially, all he wanted from them was money. Had he always been like this? Had he always been a con man? I invite you to listen to the next episode of True Love Fraud Stories. in which I interview the woman Carlo Giovanni Malozzi was married to several years before Judith encountered him. You may find the story surprising. You mentioned previously that Carlo did not want to be called Carlos. Can you talk to me about that?
I don't know whether he was ashamed, embarrassed, whatever, over the fact that he was born in Colombia, or whether there was so much pain associated with him being born in Colombia. So Carlos is obviously Hispanic. And so if we were out anywhere and somebody called him Carlos instead of Carlo, the Italian version of the name, he would get very, very agitated and upset. And in fact, Carlo was only used around Terry and Terry's family, the Foster family. Any association with the singles group, it was Giovanni, or a shortened version of Giovanni, which is a name I don't know when he decided to pick up that and adapt and adopt that name. But with his family, it was always Carlo.
And what did you call him?
Both. When I was with his family, it was Carlo. When I was hanging out with him, it was Giovanni.
True Love Fraud Stories is produced by lovefraud.com. For more information about this story, other great stories, or if you'd like to share your story, visit podcasts.lovefraud.com. Engineering is by Terry Kelly. To learn how to recognize and recover from everyday sociopaths, visit lovefraud.com. You'll find articles, books, and webinars. You can also book an appointment with me, Donna Anderson, for a personal consultation.